On my wedding day, my phone buzzed just as the makeup artist was fixing my veil. One new text from my mom. Don't expect anyone. No emoji, no explanation, just that. My name is Lauren Parker. I was 29, standing in a white dress at a seaside lodge in California, and at first I actually laughed because I thought it had to be a joke. Who sends something like that to their daughter minutes before she walks down the aisle? I told myself she was just being dramatic, that everyone would show up once the music started and the doors opened. Then the music did start. The doors did open. And the entire left side of the aisle, the side meant for my family, was nothing but empty chairs scattered with flower petals.
No, ma'am. No relatives.
No one. I locked my eyes on the man waiting for me at the end of the aisle and pretended it didn't hurt, pretended my chest wasn't burning every time I glanced at the space that should have been full. We said our vows. We smiled for the photographer. We cut the cake like everything was normal. It wasn't. Later that night, barefoot in my wedding dress with my heels kicked into a corner, I finally checked my phone again. There it was. A fresh Instagram post from my cousin. A group photo on a private beach in Hawaii. My mom. My family. All of them in matching linen outfits, holding cocktails under palm trees. The caption read, "Family forever." I stared at the screen until my eyes stung, then typed two simple words back to my mom. Perfect timing. That was the moment I stopped begging to belong to their family and started taking my power back. 3 days later, my mom would be pounding on my door, screaming, while I sat calmly at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee. They thought skipping my wedding was the worst thing they could do to me. They had no idea what I was about to do to them. Stay with me to the end, and I'll show you exactly how their dream trip to Hawaii became the start of their biggest regret. I didn't scream or throw anything that night. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed in my wedding dress, makeup smudged, phone in my hand, and I went very, very quiet. My husband, Danny Brooks, sat beside me, still in his shirt and tie, jacket tossed over a chair. He kept asking, "Are you okay, Lauren? Do you want to call her?" I just showed him the photo again, the one from Maui with the caption, "Family Forever." The same woman who spent my entire engagement calling him a high school teacher with no ambition had flown to Hawaii on my wedding day to drink cocktails in matching linen and pretend everything was perfect. My mother, Victoria Parker, loved to say she and my father built everything from nothing, that Parker and Co-Home was her kingdom. That part was technically true. What she always left out was me. I was the one who stayed late at the office in Houston, then logged in again from our apartment in Seattle, fixing her mistakes on loan documents, cleaning up messes when my dad, Rick, forgot to send payroll, smoothing things over with the bank when they pushed credit lines too far. I took the accounting courses. I became the signature every bank officer wanted on a form. CFO sounded impressive on paper. In real life, it meant I held the keys to every account they were swiping in Hawaii. My mom hated paperwork, hated contracts, hated dealing with lawyers unless it affected her image. Years ago, she signed power of attorney and joint control over most of the business and family cards to me because it was easier if I handled it. It was supposed to be temporary. It never was. I had been their safety net for years. I paid off business trips that were really vacations. I quietly shifted money when my brother Jason overdrew the family credit line chasing yet another half-baked project. That night, staring at that glowing screen and that stupid caption, something in me snapped into focus. If I could keep them from sinking, I could also let them feel the water for the first time. Danny watched me close the photo and open my laptop. "What are you doing?" he asked softly.
Working, I said.
My voice sounded calm, almost bored, but my hands knew exactly where to go. I logged into the main bank portal for Parker & Co., the same system I used every week. Routing numbers, account lists, corporate cards, family cards, the so-called growth fund my parents loved to brag about. My name was on all of it. One by one, I started flipping switches. The corporate cards they were using for the Maui resort and spa were set to suspended. Authorized users removed. Personal logins disabled. The Parker Family Growth Fund, the one Jason was already counting on to open his flashy restaurant in Austin, placed on hold pending review. Automatic transfers to my parents' travel account paused. I emailed the bank manager, a man who had watched me drag my parents through 3 near disasters, and told him I was initiating a full review of all shared accounts and would not approve any new charges without my direct consent. Danny sat quietly for a moment, then tried to joke. So this is what it looks like when the CFO is mad. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. This is what it looks like when I stop fixing things, I said. We ate leftover wedding cake straight from the box in bed. He held me while I cried for a few minutes, not just over the photo, but over every time my mom said he wasn't on our level, every time my dad told me to be reasonable and think about the business instead of my own life. Sometime after midnight, my phone lit up on the nightstand.
Group chat. Parker fam.
The first message read, "Anyone else's card not going through?" Then, my room just said the card was declined. Then, "What's going on with the business account?" I turned the screen face down and went to sleep. I knew this was only the beginning. The money was the first thread. 3 days later, when my mom was pounding on my apartment door in Seattle, that thread was already unraveling. 3 days after the wedding, Seattle was gray and wet, the kind of morning where the rain just hangs in the air. I stood in my tiny kitchen in an old brick building, pouring coffee into my favorite chipped mug, when someone started pounding on the door so hard the frame shook. Danny was still half asleep in the bedroom. I knew exactly who it was before she even spoke. "Lauren, open this door right now." My mother's voice cut through the hallway like a fire alarm. I took one slow sip of coffee, set the mug down, and walked over. When I opened the door, Victoria Parker practically fell into the apartment. She still had a faint tan from Hawaii, still wore a linen dress and big gold earrings, but her face was flushed red with fury. "What did you do?" she hissed, eyes wild. "What did you do to the accounts?" I stepped back, letting her stomp into the living room. She didn't even say hello, or ask about the wedding she'd skipped. "Good morning to you too," I said quietly. "Don't play cute with me," she snapped. The hotel in Maui said the corporate card was declined. The resort charges bounced. My spa appointment didn't go through. I had to use my personal card to get us out of there like some regular tourist. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I watched her rant about the inconvenience of not being able to charge first-class tickets home to the business, about how the resort manager looked at her differently once the card was declined. She said the word declined like it was a slur. Not once did she say wedding. Not once did she say sorry. "You chose a beach over my wedding," I said finally, my voice flat. "You chose matching outfits and my ties over watching your daughter get married. So yes, I know exactly what I did." She scoffed and rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, Lauren. It was one day. We told you that date wasn't great for us. You insisted on that stupid lodge. We had a family trip planned for months. You're really going to burn everything down over a small event." I actually laughed. "My wedding is not a small event," I said. "And you didn't have a trip planned. You booked it after I sent the save the dates. You just didn't think I'd ever call you on it." She jabbed a finger at me. "You ungrateful child. After everything your father and I built, you think you can just shut off the money because your little feelings are hurt? You think you can embarrass us like that? You fix it today. Call the bank. Turn everything back on. Stop being dramatic. And while you're at it, you should really think about what you're doing with that teacher. He is not good for a name, Lauren. He is not our level." Behind me, Danny came out of the bedroom barefoot in an old t-shirt, hair a mess, somehow looking more decent than everyone in that Maui photo combined. He started to speak, but I lifted a hand. I was done letting her talk about him like he was a stain. "First," I said, "Danny is my husband. You didn't show up, but it still happened. Second, I didn't embarrass you. You did that yourself when you chose a family forever photo op over your actual family. Third, I'm not turning anything back on." Her jaw dropped. "You don't have a choice. This is our company. I'm the name every bank cares about," I replied calmly. "You handed that power to me years ago because you didn't want to read contracts. You just assumed I'd always protect you no matter what you did to me." Her voice jumped higher. "You wouldn't even have that job without us. You owe us loyalty. Loyalty goes both ways, I said. You skip my wedding to sip pina coladas on a private beach and post about family forever. That's the day you cashed out my loyalty. For just a second, I saw panic flash across her face. Then it hardened. You're insane, she snapped. Fix the accounts, Lauren, or I swear you'll regret this. I stepped to the door and held it open. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. You already made sure I regretted a lot of things, I said. Not this. You chose the beach over me, Mom. Now you can choose how to pay for it. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me, then stormed into the hallway, shouting over her shoulder, You'll crawl back when this blows up in your face. I closed the door gently, turned the deadbolt, and leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment. Danny wrapped his arms around me from behind. Are you okay? He whispered. No, I said honestly, but I'm done pretending this is normal. I went back to the kitchen table, picked up my coffee, and opened my laptop again. The temporary freezes I'd put in place over the wedding weekend were only the beginning. I submitted formal documents to the bank changing authorization rules, so any major withdrawal required my explicit approval, and locking the so-called Parker Family Growth Fund until a full audit was complete. While I was there, I pulled up a loan I'd always assumed was a business vehicle and for the first time actually read the paperwork. My mother had used my name and credit to finance her latest luxury SUV without telling me. There was a box allowing a co-signer to be removed if they didn't consent. I checked it and started that process too. Outside, I could still hear my mother's voice echoing down the stairwell, furious and shocked that the daughter, who always fixed everything, was finally letting her feel the fall. Inside my small kitchen, I took another slow sip of coffee and hit send. They thought their cards declining in Hawaii was the worst of it. They had no idea that morning was just the first ripple of a much bigger wave. The funny thing about money is that when it's flowing, nobody wants to know how it works. The second it stops, everyone suddenly remembers your number. Within 24 hours of my mother storming out, my phone and inbox turned into sirens. Jason was first. At 8:07 a.m., a text came through. Hey, weird question. Did you touch the Parker Family Growth Fund? The bank says it's under review. 5 minutes later, Lauren, seriously, I have meetings scheduled. I already told the landlord in Austin I'm signing the lease this week. Then an email from the loan officer handling Jason's restaurant deal popped up, politely explaining that due to the sudden change in the collateral account, final approval was paused. Translation: no more free money. I could practically hear Jason's tantrum through the screen. By lunchtime, my Aunt Monica called, her voice high and shaky. Honey, something must be wrong with the system. I was at Nordstrom, and my Parker card was declined in front of everyone. I told them I'd call you since you handle these things.
Can you just fix it?
I have things I need to buy this week. I pictured her in designer heels, arms full of clothes she didn't need, and for the first time I didn't feel that old panic to make it all disappear. The cards are under review, I said. I can't just flip them back on.
She huffed.
Your mother says you're overreacting because she missed your little ceremony. You can't punish the whole family for that.
My little ceremony. Right.
By the end of the day, the Houston office chimed in too. An email from the bookkeeper marked urgent. The warehouse landlord wanted to know why the automatic payment bounced. The utility company for the Florida vacation house sent a disconnect notice. Vendors who once happily extended us credit were suddenly asking for payment up front. I'd spent years making sure those emails never reached my parents, catching problems before they surfaced. Now I let them stack up, a digital avalanche of consequences finally rolling downhill. Late that afternoon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize at first. When I answered, a familiar, gravelly voice came through. Lauren, it's Martin Cole. You got a minute? Martin had known my parents since before I was born, one of those old-school businessmen who remembered every assistant's name and still carried a leather planner. He'd watched me grow from the kid doing homework in the back office to the woman running the spreadsheets.
I'll be honest, he said.
Your mother is tearing her hair out. She says you've gone rogue.
I almost laughed. I'm just doing my job, I said.
There was a pause, then a low chuckle. That's what I figured. Look, I'm not calling to lecture you. I've told your parents for years they leaned too hard on you, without respecting you. They didn't listen. Now they're feeling it. He cleared his throat. Off the record, people have noticed you're less involved lately. There's a company I advise, Lighthouse Living, up here in the Pacific Northwest. They want to expand into Texas and Arizona. They're interested in acquiring shares of Parker and Co. If those shares come with a certain CFO's brain attached, even if that CFO doesn't stay full-time. You follow? I stared at the wall, letting it sink in. My parents always acted like their name was untouchable, like Parker and Co. was a monument. In reality, it was a mid-sized regional company in a crowded market. The only reason we stayed ahead was the systems I built and the relationships I maintained. They didn't own that part of me. I did. So they buy my stake, I said slowly. Even if I walk away? At a good valuation, Martin said. You get a clean exit. They get a roadmap. Your parents would get a wake-up call. Everybody wins, or at least everybody gets what they've earned. After I hung up, I sat at the table with Danny and told him everything. If you do this, he said gently, there's no going back. They'll say you betrayed them. I thought about the empty chairs at my wedding, the Maui caption, my mother calling my life a small ceremony and my husband not our level. They already did that, I said. I'm just catching up. Over the next week, with Martin's help and a lawyer who worked for me, not my parents, I negotiated the sale of my shares in Parker and Co. to Lighthouse Living. We went through numbers and clauses I used to triple-check for my father while he bragged about his empire. This time, I circled what protected me. When the deal closed, money that had once been trapped inside the Parker name moved into my control alone. While my family scrambled to adjust to a world where credit wasn't endless and the company name didn't open every door, I started saying no for the first time in my adult life. No, I wouldn't sign another loan. No, I wouldn't fix their cash flow. No, I wouldn't answer every frantic call. Instead, I took on freelance design clients, work that actually made me happy. On weekends, Danny and I packed sandwiches and drove to small parks around Seattle, hiking trails I never had time for before. We ate on a blanket under gray skies, laughing at small things while my phone buzzed face down in my bag. For years, I'd been holding their world together. Now I was finally letting them feel what happened when I stepped away. And the strangest part was, the more their world cracked, the less it hurt me. It took about 2 weeks for panic to turn into what my family called strategy. One afternoon, while I was working in a Capitol Hill coffee shop, a man in a navy blazer stopped at my table. Lauren Parker? He asked. I looked up. It was Tom, one of my father's golf buddies, a financial advisor I'd seen at countless charity galas, always smelling like expensive cologne and country club lunches. Your father asked me to talk to you, he said, sitting down without waiting. He thought a neutral voice might help. I almost smiled at the word neutral. Go ahead, I said. Tom folded his hands like he was about to offer me a mortgage. Look, he began. Everyone agrees mistakes were made. Your mother knows she hurt your feelings about the wedding, but you've made your point, right? The cards, the accounts, the sale to Lighthouse. That scared them. They're ready to talk about changes, about bringing you back into the fold in a more appropriate role. I raised an eyebrow. More appropriate than CFO. He cleared his throat and said they were willing to offer a very generous compensation package, a new title, full control over the financial side, even performance bonuses if I returned to Parker and Co. and helped stabilize things. Then he hesitated. There was, however, one concern my parents wanted him to mention delicately. I waited. Your husband, he finally said. They felt his background didn't align with the image they were trying to rebuild, the circles they moved in, the investors they were courting. It sent a certain message. If I were willing to reconsider that relationship, it would go a long way toward restoring my position and my share of decision-making. For a moment, the noise of the coffee shop faded. It wasn't shocking, not really, but hearing it said out loud like a reasonable contract clause still made my stomach turn. So the deal is, I said slowly, I get my old job back and they stop screaming if I leave my husband. Tom shifted in his seat. No one said divorce, he replied, just reevaluating whether he's the right long-term partner given what's at stake for the company. I stood up and picked up my laptop. Tell my father I already made my choice, I said, and tell him there is no amount of money that makes me trade my marriage for his image. Tom called after me, saying I was letting my emotions ruin my future. I almost laughed. My future was the first thing in years that didn't belong to them. That night, Jason emailed me with the subject line, "Can we start over?" The first two paragraphs almost sounded like an apology, talking about how things got heated and how the wedding situation looked bad. Then came the real reason. He needed the growth fund unfrozen because his restaurant deal was time-sensitive, and this was his one shot. If I really loved him as a sister, I wouldn't let my issues with Mom ruin his dream. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I told him I hoped he found a way to open his restaurant one day, and that I believed he could, but I wouldn't be putting my name, my credit, or my work behind any more family ventures. I hit send and waited for the explosion. It came the next morning in the form of a certified letter from a law office my parents had used before, filled with vague legal threats about damages, interference with business relationships, and breach of fiduciary duty. I forwarded it to my own lawyer, the one who handled my exit. He called after reading it and actually laughed. "They'd have to prove you acted outside your authority," he said. "You didn't. They signed those documents. They gave you that power. And if this goes to court, all the emails about them skipping your wedding and calling their trip a higher priority than your life event become part of the record."
They don't want that.
Around the same time, the loan I'd removed my name from for my mother's luxury SUV finally processed. The bank confirmed I was no longer attached. 2 days later, my cousin Chloe posted a story of my mother at a dealership, red-faced and arguing with a salesman while her SUV sat behind her with a bright repo sticker on the window. The caption read, "Rough week for the Parkers." I should have felt bad. I didn't. Not long after, Lighthouse Living asked if I'd be open to a short-term consulting contract to help them implement inventory systems and reporting structures I designed in my head long before my parents ever trusted me with credit. I didn't share Parker & Co.'s secrets or client lists. I didn't need to. The value was how I thought, the processes I built. Those were mine. Within a month of working with them a few hours a week, their online reviews jumped and shoppers in Texas started mentioning Lighthouse instead of Parker. The thing my parents feared most, losing status, was happening slowly and publicly. The final straw, at least for them, came on a Sunday night. I was cleaning up after dinner when a notification popped up from an old company Zoom account I still had access to. Family meeting, the title said. Against my better judgment, I joined with my camera off. Faces appeared one by one. My parents in their living room, Jason in a cramped apartment, Monica holding a glass of wine. They talked over each other immediately. My father blamed my mother for pushing the Hawaii trip, saying if she'd just gone to the wedding none of this would have happened. My mother cried, insisting she was the real victim and that I'd stolen her company. Jason shouted that they always bailed me out, but the one time he needed help, suddenly everyone wanted to teach him a lesson. In that entire 40-minute call, not one of them said sorry. Not one of them said, "We hurt Lauren." I watched them tear at each other, each trying to make this my fault while begging for a solution only I could give. When my mother finally said, "She'll come around. She always does. She's soft," something settled in me. No, I thought. Not anymore. I closed the laptop. Outside, Seattle rain tapped against the windows. Inside, Danny wrapped an arm around my shoulders while we watched a movie, quiet and steady, as my family's world continued to crumble without me holding it up. The thing about revenge, the kind I never planned to take, is that it doesn't come as one big explosion. It arrives in 100 small moments, day after day, until even people who thought they were untouchable realize the ground is gone. A month after that Zoom call, Parker & Co. Home closed its first store. Officially, it was called a strategic consolidation in Arizona. Unofficially, I knew the truth. The Scottsdale location had always been fragile. Without the safety nets I used to pull, the quiet deals I used to make, they couldn't keep it alive. Photos spread online. A handwritten closing sign. Half-empty shelves. Then a comment under a local news post made my stomach flip. Didn't their own daughter get married, and they all went to Hawaii instead? Someone replied, looks like karma. I never told that story publicly, but employees talk. People talk. Nothing stays hidden when you treat everyone like they're disposable. Reviews began to change. Slowly at first, then in waves. Love their products, but can't support a company that treats their own family like that. Heard the owners ditch their daughter's wedding for vacation.
Gross.
My parents always cared more about image than numbers, and watching that image crack hurt them more than any balance sheet. Around then, I got a call from an old Houston bank number. I almost ignored it, then answered. The woman introduced herself as an officer managing older trusts. Miss Parker, she said, we've been trying to reach you about an account in the name of Eleanor Hayes. My grandmother. My mom's mother. The only person in that family who ever sat through my school plays and asked how I was instead of how I was performing. My chest tightened as the officer explained that before she died, my grandmother had set up a trust my parents never mentioned. It came with conditions. The principal wouldn't be released until I'd been financially independent from Parker & Co. for 2 consecutive years with documented income from work unrelated to the family business. According to their records, I'd met that condition. My freelance work, my consulting with Lighthouse, and the sale of my shares all qualified. Your grandmother structured it this way so no one in your family could touch it, she said. Then she paused. She also left a note. Would you like me to read it? I sat at my kitchen table, fingers tight around my mug, and listened as my grandmother's words came through the phone. She wrote about watching my mother chase status, about seeing me carry more and more weight while being given less and less respect. If they ever choose themselves over you, the note said, I want you to have a way out they can't control. Use this to build a life that has nothing to do with their pride. Don't look back unless it's to be proud of how far you walked. By the time the banker finished reading, my eyes were wet. This wasn't money taken from my parents. It was money left to me, so I would never have to ask them for anything ever again. Within a few months, that trust, combined with my own savings and consulting income, became the down payment on a small craftsman house in Portland, Oregon. Danny and I signed the papers on a sunny afternoon, our names side by side, no Parkers anywhere in sight. As we walked through the empty living room, planning where the couch would go and where we'd hang photos that actually meant something, my phone buzzed with a text from an old coworker. They're selling the Florida house, it said. And Jason's working part-time at that coffee place on 3rd to make his car payments. Later, I heard my parents had downsized from their big Houston house into something smaller, quietly lost their seats on the business boards they loved to brag about. Invitations dried up. People stopped treating them like royalty and started seeing them for what they really were, aging business owners who burned too many bridges, including their own daughter. I didn't feel triumphant. There were no fireworks. It felt more like finally exhaling after holding my breath for years. They were living in the world they created without me holding it together. And for the first time, I was living in one I chose. I wish I could say there was one perfect moment where everything tied itself up neatly and I felt healed all at once. Real life doesn't work that way. Healing came quietly. It was the first Saturday morning in Portland when I woke up to sunlight instead of my phone buzzing with another crisis my parents had created. Danny was already in the kitchen, burning pancakes just a little, playing an old playlist from when we first started dating. I stood there in our small, messy house and realized I didn't have to check a company dashboard or answer panicked emails or fix anyone else's mistakes. It was just us. A few months later, we hosted a backyard barbecue. Nothing fancy. A borrowed grill, folding chairs, mismatched plates. Friends showed up with potato salad and cheap beer, the same people who showed up for our wedding when my own family didn't. At one point, I stood in the doorway and watched Danny telling a story with his hands while everyone laughed so hard they wiped their eyes. Someone bumped our wedding photo on the shelf and straightened it. I realized the picture was perfect even without a single Parker in it. Nothing was missing. It was exactly how it was supposed to be. I still heard things, of course. You don't walk away from a family like mine without gossip following you. Someone mentioned seeing my parents at much smaller networking events, lingering in corners. Someone else said Jason's restaurant dream was shelved and he was talking about moving somewhere cheaper. Every update carried the same unspoken question. Did I feel guilty? The honest answer was no. Sad sometimes?
Yes.
I mourned the family I thought I had, the one I kept making excuses for, the one where I believed if I worked harder they'd finally show up for me. But guilt was something they trained into me. I walked away from that too.
I didn't ruin their lives.
I just stopped saving them from the consequences of their own choices. They chose to skip my wedding. They chose image and comfort over my happiness, over basic respect. All I did was choose myself once. It took me a long time to understand this, but blood isn't permission to treat someone badly. Family isn't a magic word that erases manipulation or neglect. The people who love you are the ones who show up when it matters, who don't ask you to shrink or trade your happiness for their reputation. I used to think setting boundaries with family was selfish. That's what I was taught. Now I know it's how cycles end. How you make sure you don't become the kind of person who skips their own child's wedding for a photo on a beach. Some nights, when the house is quiet and the dishwasher hums and Danny grades papers at the table, I think about my grandmother's note. Don't look back unless it's to be proud of how far you walked. I didn't leave because it was easy. I left because staying would have meant losing myself piece by piece forever. If you're listening to this and you have a family that loves you well, hold on to them. Tell them. And if you're listening and you're stuck in something that looks like love from the outside but feels like control on the inside, hear this. You're not crazy for wanting more. You're not disloyal for wanting respect. You're not selfish for drawing a line. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop begging people to see your worth and start living like you already know it. My mom skipped my wedding for a trip to Hawaii and thought that would be the story she'd tell forever. 3 days later, she was screaming at my door because for the first time in my life, I stopped opening it just because she knocked. I built a different life on the other side. And honestly, that's the only family forever I need. If you were in my place, would you have done the same? Or have you already had to walk away from someone who called themselves family while acting like anything but? Tell your story. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. If this story touched you, like the video, subscribe for more real stories and comment which city you're watching from.